I got cut off again. I'm going to have to learn to either do these a little faster or just anticipate when that's going to happen. All that happened in the middle was we found the endpoint of CD. We found, basically in this case, I have it as the coordinate D. It was 14.7. You can go back and watch the work for that. So that gives us this endpoint. But the question is, what is the length of CD? So we need to actually use the distance formula, which hopefully you have memorized. But the distance formula, the square root of x minus x squared plus y minus y squared. So we're going to use these coordinates. I'm going to go with it this way. The x's and the y's. So 2 minus 14 squared plus negative 1 minus 7 squared equals negative 12 squared plus negative 8 squared. 144 plus 64 equals the square root of 208. And I could break that down into simplest radical form by going with a factor tree, but when I look over here at the answers, I see they're in decimal form. So instead, I'm going to type in the square root of 208 into my calculator, and it says 14.4. So the answer would be C. Again, as I mentioned before, you also could have not done this at all. You could have done the length from C to the midpoint and doubled that to get the other half. All right, if you need to go back and watch that, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to go on to the next problem. PQ is shown on the coordinate grid below. The coordinates of P and Q are integers. Point XY lies on the perpendicular bisector of PQ. What is the value of X? Well, if it's on the perpendicular bisector, the X value has to be the middle of these two. And while you can eyeball it, we're not going to eyeball it. So keep in mind the perpendicular bisector is the one that looks like this. I'm not going to use a compass, but it's the one where you go like that, and then draw your perpendicular bisector. So what the question is saying is that this bisects PQ, and we want to know the X value, not the whole coordinate, because there's a lot of points on there, but we want to know just the X value. So P is located at negative 4, 2. Q is at negative 1, 2. So we can do the whole midpoint formula, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do the X. That's going to be the average X. So negative 4 plus negative 1 over 2 is negative 5 over 2. This would be the X value, X coordinate would be the correct word. The X coordinate is negative 5 over 2. And in decimals, that would be negative 2.5. And if we kind of look at my sketch here, negative 2.5 is exactly where my bisector meets. Okay, that's it for midpoint and endpoint. Make sure you know the difference between when to use the midpoint formula and when to use the endpoint formula. Make sure you're paying really close attention to what's listed first in any problem, because the midpoint needs to be in the middle. So even if it's listed first, you need to put it in the middle. If you need to rewatch any of that again, go ahead. Otherwise, have fun.